Hey creepers, welcome to the Mrs. Night Terror channel. Join me as I tell you spooky, shocking, and scary bedtime tales. Each story is a fictional narrative, so don't worry too much about it coming true. If you think you can handle it, listen closely and imagine yourself being part of each and every story I tell. I want to say thank you to each and every creeper out there. This is the next episode of my scary story series, and surely not the last. If you enjoy what you hear, be sure to give me a follow and leave a comment below to let me know what you enjoyed the most. Today, I have a truly terrifying story for you that'll send shivers up your spine. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's get started with this not-so-true crime nightmare. Tonight's tale is called The Whispering Abscess. In the tranquil town of Harrington, where the air was always crisp and the nights forever still, lived a woman named Evelyn. Her life was simple, filled with routine and the comforting presence of her family. She loved working at her local diner, chatting with friends and coworkers, then going home to be with her fiancé and dog. But one fateful summer evening, a dull ache began to throb in her lower jaw. At first, she dismissed it as nothing more than a minor annoyance, but the pain intensified with each passing hour. Days turned into a week, and the ache blossomed into a relentless agony. Evelyn's face swelled grotesquely, contorting her once gentle features into a horrifying mask. She refused to see a doctor, insisting it was just a toothache that would pass. However, as the pain grew unbearable, something unthinkable began to happen. Late one night, as she lay writhing in her bed, the throb of her face began to make noise. It was as if the throb was becoming its own drum, beating in her head like a song that never goes away. Then it began to change. Evelyn heard a faint whisper. At first, she thought it was a trick of the mind, a hallucination brought on by the excruciating pain. But the voice persisted, growing louder and more distinct, in rhythm with the throb, like lyrics that never end. "I know you can hear me," it hissed. "Don't ignore me." Evelyn bolted upright, her eyes wide with terror. The voice was coming from within her, a disturbing presence that had taken root inside of her. She tried to ignore it, but the whispering continued, a constant maddening drone that gnawed at her sanity. Her family watched in horror as Evelyn's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She would sit for hours, staring blankly into space, muttering to herself. At night, she would claw at her face, desperate to silence the voice that tormented her. Her once loving and nurturing demeanor was replaced by a wild, haunted look that made them feel uncomfortable and worried. One morning, Evelyn gathered her family in the living room. Her swollen face was pale and drawn, her eyes filled with a manic intensity. "The abscess speaks to me," she said, her voice trembling. "It wants me to remove my teeth, all of them. It's the only way to be free." Her family recoiled in shock, pleading with her to seek medical help, but Evelyn was beyond reason. The voice had taken hold of her mind, and she was powerless to resist its commands. Her family pleaded that she need to see a specialist to help treat her condition, but Evelyn insisted that they couldn't help her. Her family knew that they needed to intervene, so they created a plan to help her. They knew the only way for her to get the help she needed was to see a dentist, but since she refused to go, they decided the next best thing was to have her evaluated by a mental health professional, and fast. Their plan was to call a therapist to help set up an evaluation of her mental state the following day, but little did they know that would be too late. That night, while everyone in the house slept, Evelyn crept into the garage and retrieved a pair of pliers from the drawer. She locked herself in the bathroom, her heart pounding as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The voice was louder now, a relentless bully that drowned out her thoughts. "Do it," the voice urged. "Free me." With trembling hands, Evelyn gripped the first tooth with the pliers and yanked. Pain exploded in her mouth, but she didn't stop. One by one, she tore her teeth from their sockets, blood spraying across the white porcelain sink, tears streaming down her face as she worked, each extraction accompanied by a sickening crunch. By morning, the bathroom was a scene of utter horror. Blood and tooth fragments littered the floor, and Evelyn sat in the midst of it all, her eyes drooping with exhaustion, her mouth a mangled mess. Her family found her there, sobbing quietly as she used the pliers to remove her last tooth. They screamed in terror when they saw the mess she had made. The horror of it all made her fiancé faint in the hallway, and soon Evelyn would pass out as well. Her family frantically called 911, but decided it would be faster to rush her to the hospital. Evelyn's body was limp and lifeless in their arms. They didn't know what to think or what to expect. Upon arriving at the hospital, the doctors sedated her immediately, stitching up her ravaged mouth and placing her on a mandatory psychiatric hold. The following morning, Evelyn woke up, unsure of her surroundings or the reason for being in a hospital bed. Her family rushed to her as she looked around. In the sterile confines of the psychiatric ward, Evelyn sat there, her eyes vacant and hollow. Her voice was quiet, and her memory was foggy. A dark memory haunted her, but she couldn't remember. "Why am I here?" she tried to ask. But without her teeth, it was hard to understand. She began weeping as she realized her teeth were missing. Her mouth hurt with unbearable pain, and she cried out in agony. She wept over and over. "What happened? What happened?" she kept asking. Her family cried. As they explained the past week to her, the tooth, the pain, the whispering abscess, Evelyn had no memory of any of it. She did not remember having any tooth pain or hearing voices, and she definitely didn't remember pulling out all of her own teeth. The doctors approached her, and as they tried to analyze her and ask her questions, telling them they were wrong about her, she ran out of the hospital room. A security guard tried to grab her, but as he tried to pin her down, she jumped over him. She reached the nurse's desk as more people tried to control her, but in an instant, she grabbed a pen from the desk and began stabbing her hand over and over, repeatedly mangling her fingers, all while screaming, "I told you not to ignore me." And as we draw the curtains on this chilling tale, our hearts still racing and our minds haunted by the echoes of the unknown, remember that the darkness we've explored is but a glimpse into the abyss that dwells within us all. Thanks to every creeper out there that takes their time of day to listen to my horrifying stories. Please remember to follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and X, and also be sure to check out my Patreon for much darker tales. Until next time, dear listeners, may your dreams be undisturbed, and may you find solace in the light of day. Good night and sweet dreams.